everyone, and welcome to episode 12 of Culture Conversations. Christmas is just around the corner, so we thought we'd get back together in person by the fireplace for a fireside chat.
My favourite spot, George.
Absolutely. So I'm George Holman.
I am Macdara Malloy.
You are. And today it's Macdara's turn in the hot seat. After putting me under the spotlight a few weeks ago, I think it's your turn now, Macdara.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So we're going to stick to the same format,
Okay.
4 questions, and it's all going to be based on your perspectives and your background.
Yep.
Okay. So, number 1, could you tell me and everyone watching and listening a tough moment that shaped your leadership?
Yep. A tough moment I had was when I was in a kind of interim role. I was managing a team, and in the process, my boss left the company. I was then asked to take on a leadership role, basically take on their role along with some other responsibilities, which meant I had to start managing my peers.
Yep.
So I went from coming in as someone who was there for a short amount of time to someone who then was kind of at the most senior level in the area for that company. So that was quite challenging, as you can imagine, where you've built relationships at a certain level, and there were others obviously who were interested in the role in the broader business. But that was a great opportunity for me to get people on side. So how to bring people with you on the journey. I also, the reason my superior had left was that the function had kind of been in a bit of a malaise.
Okay.
The morale was quite low. The perception of the department and area wasn't great. So there was an element in the role also of trying to elevate the mood, elevate the performance, and elevate the perception of the area across the wider business. So a bit like your conversation, what I always try and do in a new position like that is to listen. So I spoke to everybody, my stakeholders across the business, anybody who was using the function, almost as an internal client, to understand their frustrations, how we could help, what we could improve, and kind of come up with my plan then over the next 3 to 6 months initially. So that worked well. The mood improved as we were able to demonstrate to the rest of the business the work that was being done. We also looked at efficiencies, came up with some project work, some change initiatives within the group, which motivated people as well to improve some of the work they were doing, get rid of some of the more boring stuff, and to really focus on the priorities for everyone across the broader business. So it was a kind of tough challenge to be thrown into.
Yep.
But really an enjoyable one where I had to learn also how to try and behave as that more senior person, sit at that top table, how to speak that language, how to challenge other senior people in a constructive way. Sometimes it can be very easy to just take pot shots at people, but when you're working together and have that accountability for each other, you want people to raise issues to you in a way that is respectful and constructive. So that was something that I had to work on a bit as well.
And a question I would have is, you mentioned the need to listen, but it also sounds like it was quite a busy environment that was quite complex. How did you balance the need to listen with the need to just get on with things?
I think I tend to front load the listening. So at the very start, sometimes you have more time when you're new in a role to look at things. So I tend to spend a lot of my time in that first week or two meeting everybody and listening to them. And that helps me build momentum more quickly because I'm better armed with the knowledge of the ins and outs, finding where the bodies are buried,
Yep.
and often listening to people who have been there a bit longer, have some of that institutional knowledge around why things are done a certain way, helps you accelerate.
Making the most of that corporate memory that exists.
That institutional knowledge and, understanding of why things are the way they are, why sometimes often those individuals have great relationships across the business and have a good knowledge and experience of what their frustrations are. So actually you get a good insight from your own area, but also then into the others. So when you go and speak to them, you've got a few nuggets that show, oh, okay, right, you know what you're talking about because you've spent that time with your own group first.
Yeah. Okay. So then thinking about a moment in your career where leadership really worked, what would that be?
I think for me, I was lucky when I was starting out as a manager. I had some great role models and some great managers who really kind of walked by my side and held my hand through some of my first management experiences and really gave their time to show me how it was done. I remember one of the first teams I managed, I was quite young and was given responsibility to manage a team. There was a woman in the team who felt that she was more senior than me and she didn't really appreciate being told what to do by me. So she was quite resistant to my instructions and feedback, and my dealings with her were fairly strained. But my boss at the time really took made a huge effort to step into that situation, to listen to me and guide me one-to-one, but then also when it became quite challenging, sat in on some one-to-ones with that individual and kind of moderated those conversations, and in those meetings really modeled to me how to handle that situation, how to listen, how to understand, but also how to come to an agreement and a way to move forward. Now,
so showing by doing.
Exactly, and that's something that I've taken out of that is when training people to become managers. It really does take that investment, and it's worth. It's kind of the teach a man to fish analogy. The more time you put in, the less you'll have to do later on, and the less issues you're going to have. So, for example, if someone's managing people for the first time, that you maybe sit in on their one-to-ones initially with them, and then you slowly step back, but that they can see how to have difficult conversations, how to observe that. So that was a great, help to me. And, and I regularly will think back, oh, okay, how would that manager have dealt with this situation? What were the kind of things that they did with me, or what did they demonstrate in the way that they led teams?
And it's so interesting, Macdara, because that principle of a good manager meaning so much to you applies in any industry, applies in any type of organization. We're obviously talking with a lot of SME type organizations, and clearly, I would even say the importance of good people management and good leadership is even more important in those environments because you're closer to the detail, you're closer to the day-to-day.
Yeah, the smaller the organization, the bigger that is, right? Because the more exposure you have to each other, so those behaviors really have a bigger impact versus, where you've got a manager who maybe is in a different location or you aren't interacting with on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. How about a turnaround moment? So it might be something that you identified was wrong or a mistake that you or your team made, and that was turned around into a positive story.
Yeah. Fairly early in my career, we had so we had to set up a new team within the group where a lot of manual work was being done. So where we didn't have any computer system to help us do this particular task, and it was being managed in a spreadsheet Okay, I'm sure people still have, we know AI is around, but I'm sure some tasks people need to figure out how to build it. And this particular task was actually losing the business money because it wasn't applying the correct charges, let's call them, to a product. So actually it was a bit of a mess. The business were losing money. So we had to come up with a way to A, save ourselves time, but B, close this gap. So we were tasked with coming up with a way to automate this process. We worked with the business to understand how we might do that. And then we engaged the technology team to figure out a way that this could work. So it's a very simple example, but I think what we did there was, came up with what we needed, spoke to the technology team, which was around when the business had the product. We would go to the business and say, okay, how much should we charge? We would put that into a system. It would go to the business. They would approve it, and then it would be applied to the product so that in the future, every time that product was sold, the correct charge would be applied. And I can't remember the figure. I'm sure I had it on my CV at some point, but we saved, quite like, 6 figures for the business on an annual basis by fixing that problem.
So it's establishing a system that addresses a common challenge that sounds like was otherwise, bleeding money for the business. And making sure then that is able to be scaled and used elsewhere, I assume?
It was fairly specific, but I think it was about showing that even when you're not in a commercial role, that you can understand the commercial impact of some of the tasks that you're performing. And I think that's why it was very well received and perceived, that we were able to highlight the problem. It was, causing us to spend a lot of time on something, but we understood the cost to the business for a relatively small investment. From a technology perspective, we fixed it with a solution that wasn't, so amazing, but did what it needed to do. So I think it's about, if you're doing a task that you think is costing the business money, to really try and bring that to the attention of the right people, to unlock the resources needed to do something about it. And then it's a kind of win-win for the people having to do that task, but also for the business overall.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as it's Christmas, let's celebrate the best team that you've either led or been a part of.
Sure. The best teams are generally when you have a motivated group of individuals who kind of are bought in. And often that can be when certain individuals drive that culture, across the organization. So I think if you look at, I don't love sporting analogies because we don't get to pick the team in day to day, and we also don't have the kind of money that football teams have. But if you look at a lot of the great teams, Man United, Roy Keane under Alex Ferguson. Arsenal had the great Patrick Vieira. Those great managers often had their lieutenants who would then go and drive the message and maintain the culture, that winning culture in the group. When I had the best teams that I had 2 direct reports who were very bought in to what we were doing. They were fantastic at their job. So they, were both individuals were super technical people and really knew the inside and out of their role. That wasn't my strength, but I brought, some of the other elements of what they needed to learn in terms of the people and leadership piece. So that was a great kind of symbiotic relationship with them, in that I could trust them to deal with the day-to-day of the role. They then lent on me to help them develop their leadership and people skills. And that was a great time. I really enjoyed working with them, and the wider team, and it created this, bigger environment where everyone felt like they were doing good work. They were delivering for the business. They were delivering for each other. So that was, a great experience. That doesn't happen all the time. You know, I
Sure.
think sometimes it's the individuals, it's where people are at in their career, it's what's going on with them personally, how motivated they are.
Yeah.
But that was a great experience because it probably had the right balance of those different skills and elements that we needed to create that winning team.
Just to remind you, that's the second podcast episode you've brought up Roy Keane, but it's fine. It's fine. We're both Arsenal fans, so we'll move on from that one. So if you had to step into the DeLorean and go back in time,
Yeah.
like back to the very beginning of your career, and you could give past Macdara one or two or however many pieces of advice, what would you say to him?
I think when you start out in your career, and certainly for me, as someone who is passionate about my people and my teams, that could spill over a little bit.
Okay.
You know, when you're dealing with other groups and other teams internally, where you're defending your team and you're trying to get resource to help them. And I probably rubbed a lot of people up the wrong way by being too aggressive and pushing very hard. What I learned over time is, you know, you get, whatever the phrase is, you get more with sugar than salt or something, right? So learning to work with other people, be more diplomatic, and be somebody that your peers want to work with, or that stakeholder group want to work with, rather than thinking, oh God, here he comes, and I'm going to have to get on another call with them. That can be challenging because often your team want to see you as that person who's pushing everyone and fighting hard. And as I started to make that realization, you know, I also then had to educate my own teams to say, this is what I'm trying to do here, and I'm understanding that for me to get what we need, I need to change my approach here, and actually being this kind of bruiser who comes in, kicking the door down, isn't going to get what we need, and being a bit smarter, right? And really thinking a bit more smartly when you go into a room about what everyone's motivations are, what you want to get out of it, instead of being a bit blinkered.
Yes.
So I think that was, you know, that was something that probably took me longer than it should to learn, but I wish I had known that a bit earlier.
Okay, that's a great reflection. So thank you. I hope the hot seat wasn't too hot.
No, it was very nice.
Good, just
medium,
Christmassy warm.
Medium.
Yeah.
Goldilocks.
Yeah. So with that, we will close today's episode. We'd like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas. We will be taking a short break until January, but then we'll be back looking to do more episodes. So we'd be really keen to hear from anyone who would either like to guest on an episode, if you have any topics you'd like us to discuss, or if you have any more kind of feedback that you'd like us to have. So with that, I'll just say thanks again, and it's goodbye from him.
And it's goodbye from me.